In this episode, I'm joined by Iron Monocle. He's a serial creator of worlds, I guess, and keeps a blog about his most recent one. We talk about how game rules influence assumptions in the world, about world building as a hobby, and how players can be a fantastic source and contributors of lore and ideas in your world. I'm John Denor, and this is Goblin Points. Welcome to Goblin Points, Iron Monocle.
Hey, glad to be here.
Tell us a bit about yourself and also how you ended up in the Matt Colville / MCDM community.
I'm Iron Monocle, real name Seth. And I'm a, game master, world builder, general dice roller is what I like to call myself. I'm horrible with time, so I don't remember exactly the timeline of things. I was trying to think of it because I know you ask everybody this. I was like, I did know Matt's videos on YouTube for a while, but I was never really big in again, time, who knows. But it's only recently that I've actually been on YouTube, past 4 or 5 years. I've actually been on YouTube and subscribed. So it's more of a I go on YouTube and I just search for something and find it. So I tangentially knew about Colville stuff, and he has some really good stuff. And I know I remember being around at least for Kingdoms and Warfare. I remember that popping up and stuff. I didn't back it or anything, but I really honed in with Flea Mortals. And I kickstarted that Flea Mortals, and that's when I really honed in on Matt Colville stuff and MCDM in general. It came around the time when I was building my world for D&D, Skies of Merladrin, and I was trying to just make my character, but the players feel really powerful. And so at that point in time, there were no minion rules out. Right. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have my players start at level 5 so they feel powerful. And then I guess I'm just always going to use a bunch of CR1 or CR2, people so that, use cleave rules so they can do damage to multiple things. And it sort of worked, but it wasn't, great. And then Flea Mortals came out oh yeah, we're going to have these minion rules. You're just going to be able to cleave through. I'm like, this is perfect. This is what I've been waiting for.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's when I jumped in and became a full-blown fan of MCDM and stuff, and then I've been following them through with Draw Steel.
Are you excited for Draw Steel?
Oh yes, immensely. Yeah, I have a playtest group going on right now. Not super far. Right, I think they just got to level 3, and we've been playing since October, so it's been taking a while to level up. It's just time sort of thing. So yeah, we've been playing it. It's taking a little bit to grasp some of the rules for some of my players. But
is it the first RPG after D&D, I assume? Or
yeah, for most of them, yeah. Well, the big thing that really I hadn't realized this until I had a conversation with my players, is half of the group had not actually gotten into D&D until after D&D Beyond was a thing.
Oh,
and so they joined D&D when there was already all this automation that you could get in D&D Beyond. And so they're not only are they learning a new game, but this is the first time they've actually had to flip through a book to create their character and do a lot of dice, their own math with dice rolling and stuff. So they were very happy when I introduced them to Forge Steel.
Yeah, Forge Steel is great. Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned Marlodron. No. Yes. Was that the way you pronounced your world?
Marlodron.
Marlodron.
Yep.
Oh.
All good.
But I also noticed that you have a interest in building worlds, it seems.
Yes. Yeah. That's probably my favorite part of role-playing games.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's my least favorite. So I'm kind of intrigued by someone who just really likes building out the world. So are there any reason that there have been so many? Or, I mean, what makes you want to create a new one instead of just keep building on the one you've already created, I guess?
Ooh, that's a good question. My players would like to know that too, I'm sure. they're like, well, that last one was great. Why is this new one? Or like Skies of Merladrin has gone through 3 or 4 different like complete revamps.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. Again, that's just me. I just like the just the creation process. I like coming up with cool new things. I have no really good answer for that, I don't think. I don't know. Like I like reading. So this is probably it. I like reading and watching movies to learn about what's coming. Like I like to be surprised. I like to find out about new worlds and like John Wick. There's this whole world of assassins and stuff, and yeah, cool. The action's awesome and all that, but just kind of learning those little tidbits about how this world works, and like they have these coins at the hotel and everything that they do for the assassins, and it's just like learning those things is what, I don't know, just makes me enjoy those movies and books and such. And so I kind of just like to take that energy and just create my own stuff. I also like we have, there's pre-made settings and stuff, but then I'm always like, well, what if it was like this? Usually the last book I read, let's be honest, it's like, oh, well, what if I just read a book about powder mages who could control gunpowder. And I'm like, whoa.
Oh, yeah. I've read those books.
Yes.
By Brian McClellan, is it?
Yes. Yeah. I just read those like a month ago, and I was like, if I did something, maybe in Draw Steel, I could have a psionic gunslinger who kind of does the same thing, but psionic. So I was like,
Yeah.
I'm just constantly reading stuff and getting cool ideas. And I'm like, oh. I'm like, well, this wouldn't fit into this world I made, but if I made a whole new one just for this concept.
Okay, I see now.
Yes.
But this most recent one, I think, the Marladrin?
Yeah, close enough. There you go. You can just call it, half the time we just call it Skies.
Okay, that's easy.
So if you just call it Skies, that's good enough.
But so Skies is your most recent world, and
yes. From
what I could gather from your blog, it also seems like the one that the players have fallen the most in love with.
Yeah, and that's I think we've been doing it since 2018 or 2019.
Okay.
Now there's been a break probably in the past year where we haven't played, which I'm sure if my players listen to this, they'll be shouting like, "Hey, you haven't allowed us to play this for so long," because I've been revamping it for Draw Steel. Yeah, they've loved it. They've taken like the coolest part about world building is I can come up with a bunch of great ideas, and I think my ideas are brilliant. I came up with them, but the coolest ideas are the collaboration with my players. I have a ancestry called the Fungorians, which are psionic mushroom people, and
nice.
They start off basically as myconoids from D&D, but then they've slowly kind of shifted into like a myconoid mind flayer combination. Good. I mean, they're not evil, but that sort of just weird. Yeah, they're the alien race, or alien-esque race. But yeah, some of my players have just been really invested in that, have actually probably done as much creation on their like culture and how they act and stuff as me, if not more so.
Oh, cool.
So they're like really, invested in the stuff because they've helped create it.
I've always, I say always, when I've built one like homebrew world for one of my games, and I try to involve my players a bit into creation, in that when they made their characters, I kind of allowed them a bit of like, you've got this, you're from this part of this kingdom. So how the culture is in that part of the kingdom is kind of up to you. Mm-hmm. And especially one of the players really embraced that and really came up with a whole thing for how his society worked. Especially based on he basically ended up in like the winter biome. It wasn't supposed to be that in the beginning, but it kind of ended up that way because he kind of just embraced it and just went with it full tilt, which was great. But the other players, not so much necessarily. But I wanted to involve them because I like it when it's a bit more collaborative. I kind of like it also when I don't have to make everything up myself.
Yeah, it does help. And it can kind of help inspire you too, because like you come up with something, but then they're like, "Oh," and you're like, "I would never have thought of that. That's brilliant." And you can kind of riff off what they do. I mean, that's my favorite part of when I'm actually, I love building the worlds, but when you're actually playing the game, right? I love it when my players just do something I didn't think about. Like a couple weeks ago, my my players were fighting a ghost. There was an altar that was emitting a necrotic pulse. I think it was basically using the obelisk stats from the dynamic terrain objects from Joel Steele.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And there was a dead corpse on it. And I forgot my players had used downtime. One of them had used downtime to craft catapult dust. And so they're like, well, we need to get the body off of this altar. So they run up to it, and like there was a powerful ghost right next to it. So they didn't want to stay nearby. But so they threw the dust on there and then ran away. And then the next round, the body just goes flying. I'm like, oh, that worked. Wouldn't have thought of that. That's great. And those are the best times, right? It's when my players surprise me and they just come up with cool ideas. Because then I feel like I'm playing as then too, right? Like I am playing, but like there's something cool about like not knowing what's going to happen next that kind of brings me some joy.
Yeah, totally. And speaking of adapting for Draw Steel, I guess. Have you, because you have some custom ancestries in your world that doesn't necessarily map directly onto the ones in the core rules of Draw Steel, I assume. So how have you found both kind of homebrewing your own ancestries and making them work in the Draw Steel mechanic or rule set, but also have you found there has been some discussion in the MCDM Discord whether or not the core rules are closely tied to the setting or not. And seems like that some people feel it's very closely connected because there are a lot of like specific names and terms that come from Matt's setting. But Matt's argument is basically, well, that's easy. You just erase them and put in your own words and terms, and then then they're yours. Yep. Where do you kind of fall on that spectrum of how tight to the setting do they feel, or aren't they at all, and how has it been for you to kind of adapt existing ancestries to your world?
Yeah, so I think the coolest thing they did, the coolest move that they've done is they've gone to those trait points, the ancestry traits, and being able to pick and choose, because that makes it so easy to customize, I think. Because, I mean, the dwarf, all right, let's look at the dwarf. Their signature trait could be a problem if you don't want them carving runes into their skin or their stone skin. I love that. I think it's a great idea. So keeping it. But then if you just look at their other traits, they're mostly dwarf traits. And if one of them, like, I got rid of Stone Singer. I forget what it was called. There's one where they could, like, for 10 or an hour, they could sing to the stone and it would, like, shape it, basically like a mold earth type of thing.
Okay.
I think maybe that got rid of in the newest version. I don't know. But I was like, that's cool. I think that's a call to Rings of Power, where when the doors were singing to the mountain, which I thought was really cool. But I was like, that's not really a thing for my doors.
Okay, yeah.
So I think just by making those different traits, I can be like, okay, there's one, like with the dwarves, there's one I didn't really care for. So really easy to just take that one out and replace it with something else. That's what I've done for most of them. Their ancestries are so cool. There's no way I couldn't just take their ancestries. Like, I was like, oh, okay, these D&D ancestries that I had before, which all roughly the same, a few changes. But I was just like, man, they're cool. They're so evocative. And I'm like, okay, well, I have to, like, I'm going to transition to basically using these, doing a few small tweaks for my world. And so that's basically what I did. I think the Fungorians, the mushroom people, are the most original. So they do share. I did steal 2 racial traits from 2 other ancestries that I don't use. The Time Raiders, they got psionic gifts. And then they have, I forget what the name is, but the elves have ability to recall lore because they live for so long.
Yeah.
Like they get an edge on lore rules.
Right, yeah.
So my elves don't live that long. So my elves live a normal. So I took that from them. And the Fungorians have a cool thing, I think, where like, this is a little gross, but this was kind of inspired by Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy. But when a Fungorian dies, their children actually, because they're fungus, their children actually grow from the corpse of their parent. Which is a little weird. But they also then retain memories from their parent and maybe even their grandparent.
Oh, interesting.
Because they were coming from the same body. And so basically they have the ancestral recall of being able to remember past lore because they can share the memories of their forebears.
Interesting. I actually kind of like that.
Yeah,
Maybe I should steal them.
Go for it.
Do you think this is a bit more general question? Do you think that having the proper nouns in the ancestries and kind of having, I would say, a bit less generic names of some of the ancestries, is that basically, is it a good or a bad thing, do you think? Should that be done more in RPGs? Do you think it's easier to kind of adapt them once you don't have to come up with how they... Let's take one thing specifically. For example, the Time Raiders seems very specific to Orden. And I think some people find it weird to have space fantasy in their fantasy game. But do you think that having the Time Raiders in there makes it easier or more difficult to adapt the core rules of Draw Steel to a different setting? I mean, in one case, you could just rip the Time Raiders out and say that they don't exist in this setting. But do you think it is easier or more difficult to keep them in and try to adapt them as a new concept in the world? If you understand what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, I think it's better for them to be there and have to take them out or make changes to them than having to put something like that in. It's inspirational, right? Like having that stuff there, you can look at it and be like, oh, okay, you know what? I might not like my oatmeal with cranberries in it, but I like my oatmeal with raspberries in it, right? Sure. And so you can just go in and be like, okay, okay, maybe I don't like sci-fi, but maybe these are psionic spider people.
Sure, yeah.
And you can reflavor it. You can use it as inspiration for other things as well if you want. Like again, I stole their psionic abilities and put them in my mushroom people.
Yeah, that's true.
I just think all their stuff that they've done with saying specific things and being very like tying to a world, I think is very important. We have enough generic stuff out there, and I would argue that their stuff is still somewhat generic. I mean, I'm probably just got a lot of people mad when I said that. But but like there's that tightrope. There's that line they have to balance, right? They want to get stuff that's cool and new and inspiring, but they also have to be like, okay, well, I mean, not everyone's going to be playing this in Vasloria. Some people just want some more generic stuff. So there's that line they have to kind of balance, right? So they can't do a complete, they couldn't do, I don't even have a good example because they did a good job. I think they did a good job at balancing that.
You mentioned having thoughts about how game mechanics influence the world and the narrative, which I found interesting because, as I mentioned, I've only created my one homebrew world. And I don't think it was that intentional, but it's kind of system agnostic, or at least I didn't think of any specific system when I made it. I just put stuff in it that I thought was cool with no... I used it for a D&D 5e game, but there was stuff in my world that I don't think there's a spell that can do those things, but they're just a fact in my world. And to me, it seemed... I don't know if that's if that's a me thing or if that's a general thing, but I just found it kind of interesting how you think of game mechanics influencing the world. And to me, that seems... it seems so limiting to kind of, okay, which spell do I use to make this door do the thing I wanted to do?
So it's not like it's not that specific. Because you can make up anything you want. It's more of like, so the spell casting system in D&D, you can, and just the whole how it works, right? So let's take an example of one of the reasons I was looking for a new system is because I wanted to make something called Storm Scarred. Storm Sorcerer. Basically, I wanted to make a Storm Sorcerer with narrative ties to the world, right? That's why they had the weird name. But but I wanted them to be able to like basically slowly summon a storm, or quickly, hopefully, if they're powerful enough, but then like get more powerful. And you but in D&D, one, you use spells and you get weaker and weaker throughout the day. Like that's just so how no matter how you narratively say magic works, it's still something you have to say. You get weaker and weaker without a rest, right? So that's one of those impacts it has on the world. Now, you can always flavor and try to separate those things, but I find it's like people are playing the game as mechanics, and so that's going to be kind of, again, it could just be my group, right? But like that's where the lens of the world is kind of through the mechanics as well. And so, and then I also like for this Storm Sorcerer, I'm like, they're just casting, they're pulling lightning and wind from the sky and just casting it. But again, in D&D, you have to have a very specific spell that does those things.
Yeah.
Like if it's a player character, right? Like if it's an NPC or whatever, you can just say they do stuff and they do stuff.
Yeah.
But like if this is a player character, you have to have these spells. And it's like, okay, so what's the difference between this lightning bolt and that lightning bolt and a bunch of lightning bolts? And so you kind of have to think of just like, okay, we have these spell slots that I have to cast. I only know so many. And how does that play into how things act in the world? Whereas with like Draw Steel, how do spells work? I mean, I'm shrugging for the people who like, who can't, no one can see me. I'm like, it can work however you want. Everyone just has abilities.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a much more freer system to describe. Now, so I think like the Elementalist will probably be a great basis for my Storm Sorcerer idea. I'll probably just take that template and then just give it like a bunch of storm abilities. Yeah. Maybe even make it a subclass, right, of the Elemental. But we don't have... So the Elementalist right now is just they cast... They're very elementalisty. They're druids, they're shamans, they're pyromancers. I mean, you have the Void Mage, but they're all pulling from the earth and the different elements that they have. And they're more, if you're looking at kin to... 5th edition, right? They're more like sorcerers than wizards, right? Just in the loose sense. Yeah. And so right now in Draw Steel, you don't really have like the arcane nerdy wizard class, right? There, I mean, again, you can flavor it to do so, but which probably wouldn't be that hard to do. But it's just one of those things where, okay, now like if I have wizard arcane towers in one of my cities, Imperion, they're ruled by mages, but I'm like, I don't know if there's nothing in the game right now that kind of fits my idea for that arcane wizard. Like, there's no, again, for player characters, there's no, man, I don't know how to describe this. No arcane spells, right? If you, like, there's no divination, there's no if you want to be the wise, like Merlin, if you want to be the wise wizard in a tower sort of feel, right? There's blasty stuff, mostly blasty stuff or druid-based healing and that kind of stuff. And teleportation galore. So that's where, like, spells, or not, the magic system in particular, going back to your original question here, the magic system in particular, I can feel can shape how your world works, just because of the mechanics.
That makes sense.
I don't know if I explained that well at all.
Yeah, that makes sense when you put it that way. Because when I built that homebrew world, my group have only played. We played a few different games, but it's like we always go back to 5e. That's kind of like our main thing, and we sometimes, like once a year, we dabble in something else, and then we go back to 5e again. Which I hope the Draw Steel launch is the end of, and then we go back to Draw Steel instead, but we'll see.
Hey, that's the pros of being the game master, at least in my case, is I say, hey, if you want to play games at all, this is what we're playing. So.
True. I just find it so interesting that you find world building such a captivating hobby, because to me, I think I'm the opposite. I tried making my own homebrew world, and I think at the point where we kind of started playing, and my players started asking like more detailed questions about how would this work, I kind of realized, oh, I don't think I enjoy this. So I just find it so interesting and fascinating that you want to spend time just doing that bit. It almost seems like that's like a separate hobby unto itself for you, where you just build worlds because that's what you do.
And I'll be honest. That's one of the reasons I started the blog. Is I mean, one, so I could build this world, but also so I would keep building this world, and I'd keep on track of this world, so that my players could actually play in it. Because if I didn't have I mean, it's not like the few people who read my blog wouldn't burn my place down or anything if I missed a week. But I'm like, okay, if I'm every week or now like every other week doing a blog post, then I'm making progress, and my players will actually be able to play in this, Whereas, yeah, there is, as I said before, there's a bit of a problem where I'm like, like I have ideas about like 2 or 3 other worlds, but I'm like, no, you got this one. Let's focus on this one right now. So I think if I knew how to write, I'd be an author, but I don't know how to write. So I think this is probably my outlet for that, right? Like I don't have to worry about dialogue, but I can just like kind of create a world and create some characters, and then.
Okay, yeah. I noticed, I was reading on your blog, and I noticed that one of the comments was from Novina, who also goes by The Nature GM, which was my first guest on,
yes.
on Goblin Points.
That's how I, your podcast was how I found out about her. And then, we've been commenting on each other's posts and stuff, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, interesting. I just thought it was so, it kind of came full circle and for me. Also, I saw that you also banned a lot of classes from your setting, which I thought was interesting. And not the concept itself, that I've heard of that before. But you seemed so aggressive. Because I think you were talking about banning like 4 or 5 of the classes from 5e, which seems like a lot.
Yeah. Trying to remember. The cleric was definitely not allowed. There aren't gods in my world.
Okay.
The gods left. So they might come back someday. Who knows?
Interesting.
But they left. So any of like the holy based classes were out. I didn't like bards. I have a thing with bards.
Bring it.
I love the musical chanting sort of, or that sort of thing. I like it in books.
Okay.
Like I'm reading a book now. Oh shoot, is it Shadow of the Gods? Might be the series. I don't know, but it's kind of like a fantasy Viking thing. And they have, I forget what the satyr. I don't know, some sort of magical. They're witches basically, and they sing a magical song while they're on the ships to keep sea monsters away. I'm like, that's cool. But then there's just something when you have a bard in the middle of combat who's like, oh wait, let me just sing a little ditty or bring out my lute in the middle of combat, and I'm like, So like, for the D&D version, I outlaw the bard, but I was like, hey, if you want something similar, we'll just do an arcane trickster with charisma as their modifier.
Okay, okay.
And I was like, that's close enough. It's not music based, but you still get all the illusions and kind of that swashbuckling feel. But I will say, for Draw Steel, the Troubadour is dope. I really, really like it. So the Troubadour is allowed in. I was just like, I don't know. Singing as a magical tool just always seemed out there. Like, I'm like, you have all these like different magical traditions, and then just, let's sing, which again can work.
Yeah.
I was like, for Skies, I'm just like, you know what? There's only like you're super special. You're the one who can do that magic. I don't want to have to come up with why magic singing works. So it's just like, if anyone plays a Troubadour, they're one of very few people who can do that.
Okay.
So plus like half their abilities are just like changing things.
Yeah.
I read I don't know if I read the latest version, but when it first came out, the first version of it at least, I was just like, this is basically like a demigod. Like they're just saying, oh wait, no, this didn't happen. This did happen. Oh, you thought that thing was dead? Oh no, they're not dead anymore. Oh, hey. And I was just like, that's some like god level tier stuff right there. I just feel like that's what's like a god in like mortal form would do or something. That's what it just struck me as. And so I'm like, all right, yeah, that's cool. We can keep that in. So
I always found, but both the bard and now to an extent the troubadour, I don't understand them. And to me they have no appeal, just because I can't imagine what I'm doing with a bard or a troubadour. and people always talk about them being swashbuckling, and I'm like, I would have thought that was kind of a swordsman kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
They've never really. Yeah, I don't understand the
Yeah,
fantasy
I would
of
probably
it.
prefer just a like swashbuckling class. That would be cool. I don't know how you
Yeah.
would get different subclasses on that,
Mm.
but it would be a cool thing to see.
I also have to ask, because you did the cleric and the bard, but also I think sorcerers and druids. But
Yes.
you allowed the druids back in, but with some writers, basically, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So this was for the D&D version.
Sure.
I'm looking at my blog right now because I don't actually remember. Druid sources. Oh, right. Okay. So yeah, the reason, because I wanted wizards to be like. So this was the thing. So in the original concept of Skies, there was basically two magical sides, right? There was the tower wizards, who and like no one else is magical to a degree. Ugh. The original Skies was also basically Eberron with Sky Pirates.
Okay.
So I guess there was a low level of magic that everyone had. Let's put it that way, like second to third level. But like the wizards were super powerful. And I just wanted to showcase how powerful wizards were, and so I got rid of the others. I don't know if that was the best idea. Looking back on it. Yeah, and I think the main reason I got rid of druids is because I was like, the world was shattered, and there's all these tiny floating islands that everyone's living on. So I was like, what connection to the earth is there? Right? Like it's broken. Okay. The earth is broken. These days I have like there's a whole island that was basically that's big enough that it, there's still that connection. And it's the super traditional. It's the elf island. So there's druids there, and the mushroom people live there, and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also have one of my, I don't know if it's a theory, but one of the things I like to do is you restrict as much as possible as you need to in the character creation. And then you don't have to restrict anything after that because everything is world specific, right? So I'm like, here's all the restrictions. If you can get past those restrictions, and again, my players are on board, right? Like if they were like, no, then we wouldn't be playing in this world, right? So I don't want anyone to think, I'm just shoving these restrictions down my players' throats. They're okay with it, typically.
I'll make them come around.
My way or the highway. No. But yeah, once you get through that funnel of character creation and all those restrictions, then you have the world, right? It's an open sandbox world where you can go and do whatever. And once you understand where your characters come from, you can do whatever sort of deal. I also had a really small version. So Mr. Coville had the life path system that he made, the super complicated one that never didn't go anywhere. I didn't have anything quite that complicated, but I had like depending on your race in D&D. You could roll or choose like where you came from, and then you'd roll to see if your parents were alive, how many siblings you had, rivals, and friends, to just kind of tie you into the world some more.
Have you been homebrewing specific stuff for Draw Steel? You've done some ancestries for your world, but have you done some other homebrewing for Draw Steel?
A little bit. I don't know if homebrew is the right term for it. So I created a perk. Basically, it was a perk for sailing.
Okay.
It gives you edges and stuff on that kind of thing. I've mostly done a bunch of tweaking just to reflavor different, like the careers and the different perks. And then I'm currently, I've made some kits. So there are firearms in my world. Currently, they're called rune-powered guns. Kind of trying to go off gunpowdered. I don't know. I usually just end up calling them guns anyways, but
okay, sure. But that's just like colloquialisms.
But yeah, I have like 4 kits of that. One of them is just I have a gunslinger one where it's like two firearms, but that's just rapid fire under the rapid fire kit under a different name.
Okay.
It's just you can shoot 2 people at once. But then, I have like I call it the pirate one, where you have like a light weapon and a pistol. And it's mostly a melee build, but then it allows you to, you can use your ranged weapon like on some the signature kit ability is like you can fire your pistol and it can be up. It can be someone who's right next to you, and you don't get the bane on it. Like you're on a ship and you're surrounded by people and you're fighting with your sword and then unload the gun sort of thing. Right now, I'm working on complications. That'll be the next blog post. And it's like, I think 70, like I went through the whole list of 100 and 70 of them are like, perfect. I'm just going to keep them as is. Why do the work when there's great? I think there was like 10 to 15 that I needed to just like reflavor. Like I don't think there are like hags and fairies in my world. So there's a couple of those that like you get cursed by those. So I just kind of reflavored those. And there's like 10 that I need to just come up with new ones. Okay, So I'll be coming up with some complications tomorrow. That'll be my day tomorrow. Because Tuesday, 3 days to get that all done. Well, I mean, by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be done. Hopefully.
Yeah.
So yeah, right now it's just a bunch of small stuff. Kind of so I just had my players and the playtest group just basically arrived in Skies. There was a portal that just opened up and they were thrown through it and now they're there. They knew it was going to happen, right? It was like, hey, you guys want to help me test out my world here? And so they got there. I have my original Skies group who should be, we need to still find a time to make that work. So hopefully in the next month or two. But once I get people actually playing that's going to probably help me focus on some of the bigger homebrew stuff. So I have a lot of plans on just like, I want a Storm Sorcerer class or subclass. I want to do that like psionic gun firearm person, like a powdered mage class, and then like subsystems. Skies isn't like super heroic. I mean, it's like it's heroic in the sense of like they're powerful, but they're not necessarily like the original group are pirates.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
The original group of people who played in Skies were pirates. Hence the name Skies of Morladrin, which stands for pirate in some language. So you're not, they're not bad people, but there's a lot of, I think I take a lot of inspiration from like cyberpunk. So the powers that be, while not necessarily evil, are definitely corrupt and selfish, right?
Okay, yeah.
There's a whole thing in my world that sure you can find magic items and stuff on the abandoned islands, in the typically in what I call the world storm, which is the storm of islands and portals opening up and all that kind of stuff. And you can find that, but technically if you keep that, that's illegal, right? Each of the different powers in the surrounding areas are like, no, we know how to best use those. So you need to hand them over. And there are people who they are part of like a relics hunters guild. And so they go down, they find it, and they return it to the powers that be. But of course, I don't think players will ever do that. They don't want to. They want to keep those magic items. So there's kind of that like I think they're heroic in the sense that, but they're on more of the chaotic side of being heroic, right? They're not going to always obey the laws. They're not always, someone out there is not going to be happy with what they're doing. Let's put it. The reason I went on that tangent, the wealth system,
right,
is cool, but it's not as in depth as I need it to be.
Right. Yeah.
I need to come up with and homebrew some more in-depth system there, at least a plunder system for if people actually go pirate a ship. Plunder can get transformed into wealth of some sort and deal some stuff with that. I'm also looking to ship combat. Is a pretty big thing. I should probably get on that. That's probably one of the first things I should probably make for my players. And I know half of them are just huge into, the crafting rules in Dual Steel are pretty great. But, and so I'll need to figure out how to add ship upgrades into that system.
Oh, nice.
Because ship combat's great for some of them, but half the people are just, they're into that. Oh, okay. So how do we maximize? Okay, we can add more gun ports here, or we can, how do we speed up the ship? Okay, we can buy this type of, sail. Some of them get really into that upgrade sort of thing. So some sort of ship upgrade system I'll have to make as well. But again, that's once we actually get into playing the world, which hopefully will be this month or next month, that can help. Again, inspiration from the players helps motivate. Those sort of things.
It sounds like you have multiple groups playing in the same world at the same time. Is that it? Is that correct?
I will. I have not in the past. This will be the first time that multiple groups will be playing in it. And I'm not sure yet if it's going to be a shared world or not.
Okay.
I think it would be cool to do like a pseudo shared world.
Mm,
Like if they're both in the same place at the same time,
yeah.
I'm not going to deal with that. Like that's just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we'll figure out what happened. Like but if someone went to a certain place and then they decided to, instead of fighting the zombies in the forest, they decided to just burn the forest down.
Mm.
That's what players do sometimes. And then the
Yes.
next group comes, then maybe the forest will be burnt down, right? So
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Probably we'll see with the players. They will probably like that idea. So I'll probably try and keep it like pseudo the same world, but make it easy on me.
Okay. So you would share with your players whether or not their worlds are kind of interweaving, and so okay, yeah. I'm just asking because in I had it was kind of a rival slash the BBEG was a noble person in like the city they ended up using as their hub city, and I I felt kind of I was scared that my own creativity wouldn't properly kind of make this person feel like a real person. It would feel too much like it was just me. So I had a player who weren't able to join us regularly anymore, so he stopped playing with us. But I messaged him and like I'm like, are you up for just playing one of the one of the NPCs in my current
Nice.
campaign? So I just sent him weekly reports of what the players were the player characters were doing, and he was like, oh, plotting against them and doing tons of stuff that I never would have thought of.
Oh,
I'm
that's
going to
awesome.
send some spies. I have spies, right? Well, you do now. Of course, you have spies.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, and I didn't reveal that fact to them until after we were done playing in that campaign. I'm like, oh, you know the, the shit stain you all hated. Yeah, that was played by Yngve.
Oh man, my players would probably catch on so fast if I did something like that. They'd be
Mm.
like, "This bad guy's a lot more unpredictable than usual." You're coming up with some creative ideas, Seth. What's different? These aren't your usual ideas.
Do you play mostly online or do you play in person when you play?
These days, yeah, it's mostly online.
Yeah.
Again, the original Skies group when we started in like 1819 was in person, but since then, well, we've moved, and yeah, we
Yeah,
just
okay.
everyone. I mean, most people have moved, so that's the thing. I don't think any of my groups have. We might have like most of the people like in an area, but
Mm.
there's always at least one person who's like a couple hours away.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's online these days. Every once in a while, like once a year, we'll try and get together. I
Mm.
had a campaign called Prophecy of Dragons that I ran, just a made up thing. I think it was inspired by Fizban's Treasury of Dragons or something. There's a dragon book in
Yeah.
for fifth edition, and they
Sounds
had
about right.
they had the Cataclysm dragons or something, and they talked about how like these dragons get so powerful because they hop through the multiverse and like, okay, I can't remember if this is what I ended up doing with it or if this was the original idea, but like,
Mm.
and then if they consume themselves in each of these multiverses, they just get more and more powerful.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so I actually had two different groups in this Prophecy of Dragons game. They were in different worlds. But they basically had to go fight the same dragon in their world to prevent this, plane hopping dragon from getting stronger. But for both of those games, we played online until the final encounter, and then
Ooh.
the final encounter, we were able to all get together and play for play for an afternoon and stuff, which was really great. I had a player try and hop on the dragon and. And then the dragon, they were in a volcano, and so the dragon took a dive into the lava. So that was
Wow.
great. They got off in time, sadly, but
They're fine.
they're fine.
That sounds really fun. Yeah. At the end of my interviews, I usually ask my guests for a recommendation of some sort. Might be anything that you want to put a highlight on, basically, or something that people should either check out or be aware of. So,
Yeah.
what have you got in store for us?
All right, yeah. So hopefully, I can just share two things.
Go ahead.
All right,
Even
so
better.
All right. So there is an RPG called Iron by Sean Tompkins. It's kind of Iron He has a sci-fi version called Iron Starforged, and then he has one called Sundered Isles, which is like a piratey ship based on islands. So very useful for me. But one of the cool things he does, I would call it powered by the apocalypse on steroids.
Oh, okay.
Like sometimes you have these, like say the only other one I've ever played was Dungeon World, and so you have these few abilities to do stuff. And this one though, there's like abilities for everything, and there's a bunch of different tables and everything. But the cool thing he has for all of his stuff is he is part of the world building process, and I believe they're just called the truths, and there's usually about 11 of them. And I've done this for the Prophecy of Dragons game. I did this for, and they're basically, I think something if you want to collaboratively make a world with your players, is come up with these truths, and they're things like magic, like how popular is magic in this world, or is it real? Like, is magic just a thing people talk about? Is it just stories? Is it just some rituals? Is it like something that only a few people can do, or is it like everywhere? Or like monsters. Are monsters just stories in the dark? Are they out in the wilderness? Or are they like everywhere invading villages or something? And so there's just all these different levers you can set to kind of create the world, which I think is really cool. I think everyone should look into it if you're interested in building worlds, because it's just a really cool. You don't have to use their exact stuff, but it's just a really cool way to make a world. And in my experience, the more involved your players are in helping you create the world, as much or as little as they want, the more what's the word? Wow. Doesn't matter. The more involved they'll be, the more they'll care. Yeah. They'll care more. So yeah, Iron Sworn, I think at least at one point in time, the PDFs were free. So
okay.
That's pretty cool. The second thing is something I really like. It's a podcast, and this might be super popular. I'm not sure. A podcast called Midst, MIDST. I think it's owned by Critical Role now. So it's an audio drama. It's like a science fantasy space western. But it's weird in a really cool way. And I think there's some illustrated YouTube videos on it and stuff. But if I would really recommend people listen to it and just listen to it on Spotify or whatever podcast place people listen to, because it's just so evocative. It has like 3 narrators. They all voice different people at different times, and just the sound effects and their narration and everything is just so evocative. And it's been one thing that's really like, it's very sci-fi, so I haven't really like sci fantasy, whatever, but like it's just really evocative and just kind of helps you think of cool creative ideas. So I think there's 3 seasons. And the episodes are like from like 10 minutes to like 40 minutes, depending on the episode. And that's like, it's completed. So, you don't have to worry about getting into something that's not done. But it's just really, really cool. It starts with the moon falling onto this town. So, you can't start off in any cooler way than that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. Well, Iron Monocle, that's how I know you.
Hey, that's all good. Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on. It was great having you.
Oh, thank you. It was great being here.
Thanks again for coming on, Seth. As I mentioned, I'm not that into creating worlds, but I can see why it's captivating to some to delve into these worlds where the concepts you really like and think are cool is canon. You can find links to Seth's blog About Skies, to him on Blue Sky, the Ironsworn RPG, and Midst in the show notes. If you want to be featured on Goblin Points or know of someone else who should be, leave a comment on YouTube or Spotify, or send me an email on tips@goblinpoints.com. Links to the MCDM Discord server, the subreddits for MCDM and Draw Steel, the YouTube channels of Matt and MCDM, and the complete sync section and this script is in the show notes. It's also on goblinpoints.com. Next episode is on the 5th. That will be the roundup episode for February. See you next time. Snackis.